were really important because they didn't have modern refrigerators back then, so they had to figure out some way to preserve foods, especially in the countries who had extended periods of hot weather and limited access to fresh produce. Preserving lemons with salt is one of the simplest and most ancient preservation methods. As I said, they originated in the Middle East, and they're now used in cooking all over the world. You see all the fancy chefs are now using them. The preservation method causes the peel and flesh to soften and absorb the salt. It also removes the bitterness from the peel, so you can use it in a wide variety of recipes. Salad dressing, either it's great on chicken. We'll talk more about uses once we get into preserving them. So rather than just kind of keep rattling on to you, the handout is available, so you can read all of my notes there, but we'll get started. It's a simple recipe. You're gonna need a jar. You can either use, hope everybody can see, you can either use like a regular standard old canning jar, or if you have one with the lovely hinge top lids, which I love. I will say that if you use a regular canning jar, you'll want to get, they make plastic lids for them because the salt is very corrosive, and you'll see that it starts to kind of corrode the metal ring and the lid. So I recommend, if you're going to use just a glass canning jar, get a plastic lid to put on it so that you can seal it. This way you won't get any of the kind of corrosion on it. I happen to love these jars. I just like them. They're simple. I have found them very cheaply at our Dollar Trees here. So this one cost me $1 at Dollar Tree. So I look for them also every time I go to a thrift store. I'm always on the lookout for jars. So the recipe couldn't be simpler. We are going to cut up lemons, and we're going to shove them in a jar and pack them with salt. There are a couple of ways you can cut your lemons. You can slice them in slices. You can quarter them. Some people will quarter them but leave, a tiny little bit so that they're still connected at the bottom. I typically prefer either quartering them all the way or slices because it's just easier. I'm a single person, so if I just want a little bit of preserved lemon, I don't have to unpack the entire jar and pull out the entire lemon just to get one section that I need. So I tend to prefer slices or quarters. What you want to do is just slice off, and hope everybody can kind of see. I'm sorry with my camera. You're just going to slice off the edges of your lemons. My Rachel Ray trick of having my garbage bowl handy, which is fabulous when you're cooking for demonstrations. And you're just going to quarter it.
Do you just use normal table salt, or do you use non-iodized salt?
I would use non-iodized salt. I tend to use either kosher salt or sea salt. I just don't like the iodine in it. Just, I don't know, it gives it an off flavor to me, and I just don't like that in the lemon. So I tend to prefer either sea salt or kosher salt. I have found you can get sea salt rather inexpensively if you have, we have a little Asian market here in Tallahassee that has I got like a 3-pound bag of sea salt for, I want to say like $5. So it was very affordable. Yeah, I don't use table salt typically in my cooking.
As a warning to other Canadians, I've been about 50-50 on finding sea salt with and without iodine. So check your labels.
I have never seen sea salt with iodine in it.
And neither had I until I didn't read the label.
We actually have enough lemons here that I might need both jars. So really all you're going to do is take your jar, whichever jar you're using, put in a little bit of salt, and then you're just going to start jamming lemons in here and sprinkling them with salt. When you put the lemons in, you want to kind of press down a little bit because you want some of the juice to come out of the lemon. You want that salt to be really saturated. If you find that you have a dry lemon or it's just not giving off enough juice, I always keep a little bit of extra lemon juice handy so that at the end, if it's just not damp enough, I'll kind of like drizzle in a little bit of lemon juice here. So we're just going to pack the lemons in here. I hope everybody can see it's pretty easy. Just pack them in, mush them in. We'll get one layer in. We'll add more salt. You really want to use a lot of salt. Don't be afraid to put salt in here because this is what's preserving the lemons. So you really just want to get the salt in there.
So there's a question in chat, which is, would slices absorb the salt better versus quarters?
Yes, it does absorb the salt because you're really going to let this sit for several weeks before you use it. It really just depends on taste. And it really depends on what you're going to use it for. So with the lemon, end up using them. You really, unless you really like the salty punch of it, the flesh of the lemon, you know, the pulp really gets kind of really soft and very salty. So you end up a lot of times cutting off that pulp and you're just using the preserved or pickled rind of the lemon. So it really just depends on what you're, see if we can mush one more in there, but I don't think we can. So it really depends on what your ultimate end goal is for the lemons, how you're going to use them. So I sometimes do slices. I sometimes do quarters. I typically don't like leaving it attached. Like I said, I don't want to have to pull out the entire lemon. And see, this is not really giving a lot of juice off right now this morning. So what I'm going to do is take the lemon juice and just pour it in. Like I said, you really just want to kind of get that salt saturated. And I don't know if you can see, you can kind of see it coming down the edge of the jar here. So we'll let that one sit. This really, these really will take probably about 4 to 6 weeks before you can use them. You want to let them get nice and soft.
Is there ever any other spices that get added alongside the salt?
You could add really whatever you want. You could add in some peppercorns if you wanted to. You could add in some clove. Just really whatever you kind of. It's really up to your taste and your what you like. Mostly, if they use it as salt, and then they when they cook with it, they add in their other flavorings. Juice here.
If you, in the chat, it asks if you were using the slices, would you lay them down?
Yes, usually it really is going to depend on your container. If you have a tall, I would probably always lay them down, unless you want to make it fancy and put a ring of slices vertically around the edge just to be fancy. But I would typically always just pack them down. When you're doing slices, you'd want to, depending on your container, like in this jar here, we're probably not going to get more than just one slice per layer. So I would lemon, salt, lemon, salt, lemon, salt. And you don't need to, if you're doing it like that, you wouldn't need a giant layer of salt in between. So just a nice, cover the lemon slice and then put the next one on. Tamp it, you can use the handle of a spoon, tamp down a little bit, especially if you can't get your hand in the jar to kind of mush everything down. But yeah, if you do slices, I would lay them horizontally.
Robert asks, is this strictly a preservation method, or is this being salted as a future ingredient in a recipe?
Both. So this is, they're typically going to be used in a recipe. It's not like you're going to just kind of preserve them and take them out and eat them. You can. I mean, they might a nice little nibble, but you're not going to eat like a whole bunch of it. But it's both. It's preserving it, and it's also preserving it for use in a future recipe. Not enough salt in that one. Juice. And I tend to just, if I'm adding lemon juice, I just kind of soak the top of the salt, let it seep in, and then reevaluate. So this one looks pretty damp all around. I know it's hard for you guys to see, but you just want to, when you look at the jar, you want to be able to see that all of that salt is kind of dampened, and you'll be able to tell, especially when using the lemon juice, it will take on a little bit of a yellow color from the lemon juice.
Theodora asks, are the peels still usable afterwards, like
So-
for zesting?
Yes, so that is actually a great question. The peel is what you're actually going to be using. Like I said, the pulp tends to get really soft and mushy and very, very salty. So typically what you'll see is that they will take, oh, and I had some in the fridge that I pickled ages ago, and I meant to grab those out. Typically what you'll see is they will take the quarter or the slice out, and they will cut that pulp out and discard the pulp because it is very, very salty. You could use it in a recipe where maybe the texture of the pulp of the lemon is going to be like broken down. If you're going to be making some kind of stew or soup and you want that kind of like punch of salty lemony flavor, you could actually use the pulp a little bit in that, because that will break it down and that will provide you salt and lemon flavor as well. But typically what you'll see is they'll remove all of that pulp, especially with the quarters. You're going to take all the pulp off and usually as much of the pith, the white part of the lemon as you can, and they'll just chop up or use the actual peel, the rind of the lemon. So that's pretty much it. You're just going to pack it away somewhere for 4 to 6 weeks, and then you will have preserved lemons to use in whatever recipe you want. They work great in salad dressings, stews, soups. It's great on making a marinade for chicken. It's fantastic. So do we have any other questions before we move on to sauerkraut?
Yes, Carl asks, have you ever had a jar go bad? And if so, what does that look like or smell like?
I have never had a jar go bad on me. I typically tend to be a little overcautious, and I really make sure that I'm packing it in salt. But if you open your jar and you see sort of any kind of black mold growing, if it smells anything other than salty lemons, then it's probably, if it has, if it has like a sweet rotten smell, is probably when you're gonna know something is off. Like if you ever smelled like when a lemon starts to go bad and it has that really kind of like sweet rotten smell. If you start to smell that, I would probably toss the whole thing. Then typically why I say make sure with the jars, if you're going to use these canning jars, don't use the metal lids, because then those lids can start to corrode because of the salt, and that might leach into your lemons. So use a plastic lid, or use one like this where there's no metal in contact with the contents inside. It's got a rubber gasket here that seals it, and all the metal is just the hasp on the outside, so it's not coming in contact with your contents.
We also had a question from Theodora. So could you actually juice the lemons and then salt them?
You could, but you want a little bit of the pulp still there. You don't want to juice it so much that it's like a dry husk of a peel. I've never done that. You probably could, but you really want the salt to pull the moisture out of the lemon, and leaving the pulp in there helps do that, because you want that chemical reaction between the salt and the lemon juice to sort of make the pickling liquid, so to speak. So you don't want to pull all of that moisture out of there. Anybody else?
Those are all the questions we have so far.
All right.
Oh, what, another one just popped up. What kind of recipes was this used in?
So typically it would have been used to flavor meats, to flavor poultry, chicken. They would have used it for soups and stews. Really any kind of braising recipe where you want kind of a salty, lemony punch. It's, like I said, it's used a lot in the Indian subcontinent, so works great in certain kinds of curries. Lentil dishes, I like to stick mine in when I'm just making plain old rice. A little bit of preserved lemon in there makes a really nice lemony rice. You don't even really need to add any salt to your rice, just your water and a little bit of the lemon. If you are going to cook with it, I would really make sure that you take off as much of the pith as you can, because that tends to make things sour. So I would kind of like remove that if you're going to use it. All right. Anybody else? One last question?
What is the texture like?
So the texture of the pulp gets really mushy and I don't want to say slimy, but just kind of like shy of slimy. It just gets really soft. The skin itself, the peel of the lemon kind of firms up. It gets really, really pliable. So it's, you know, it's very bendable. If you've ever made limoncello or any kind of lemon cordial, or if you've cooked or made candied lemon peel, when it sits and after it's kind of cooked in the syrup and it's really pliable, that's what the skin, the zest of the lemon kind of gets like. It's just, it's really pliable and soft. Not so much that it's soft that it's really breakable, but it's just really pliable.
Looks like that's it.
All right, we are going to move on to sauerkraut. I'm going to stash these away so I have more room to work. Put this on here. All right. Ever since I learned to make my own sauerkraut, we're going to be moving on to, I have part German ancestry, so sauerkraut, I love it. I love the sour tanginess of it, and it's really fun and very simple and easy to make your own. If you're following along with me at home, it's another simple recipe. All we need is cabbage and salt. This recipe, but sauerkraut goes back. People have been pickling vegetables for as long as you know. So this is a very simple recipe. I don't want to say it's time consuming, but it does take a little bit of time because we're going to be kneading our cabbage to release the juices. And so I just have probably about 1.5 pounds of shredded cabbage here. You can cheat like I did because I had so much other stuff going on this weekend that I wasn't going to be hand slicing like 3 heads of cabbage. So I cheated and got coleslaw mix, which is fantastic because they do all the hard work for you. So like I said, this is probably just under 1.5 pounds of sliced cabbage. My bowl wasn't big enough to fit the whole 2 pounds. What you need besides your salt and cabbage, just your standard old simple canning jars. In this case, you really don't need to worry about using the metal lids, but you can, if you want to, you can use the plastic lids. What you will want to do if you do use either lid is you want to make sure that you don't screw it down so tight that it kind of can't breathe. So you want to, kind of burp it every day if you're using the metal lids, or just, don't tighten it, but then dial it back a little bit just to let the gases escape, because you don't want a jar of exploding cabbage in your refrigerator. Another thing that you'll need is, as I'm kind of going through everything here, is I use fermentation weights. I don't know if you guys can see these, but these are little glass weights that I got from Amazon. They have a nice little handle here in the middle, so you can pick them up and put them down. I've seen some that are just kind of thin, but they get to be a little messy when you're trying to get them in a jar. These are made for wide mouth jars, which is what I have. And so when we get to the point where we're using this, I'll show you how to use it. But some kind of weight to hold your cabbage down is essential when you're making sauerkraut, because cabbage wants to float and you need to keep it underneath the brine that we're going to be creating. Another thing is you need some sort of wooden spoon, or I had a friend who made me a giant muddler, which fits just perfectly inside my jar for tamping down the cabbage. So you need some sort of heavy wooden spoon or anything to help kind of pack the cabbage into the jar. So this is really easy. So all we're going to do is take our salt. This is just plain kosher salt. And we're going to start with about a teaspoon or so of salt. You want to make sure, you want to make sure that you use enough salt to make it salty and preserve it. If you don't use enough salt, you can, it can spoil on you and it won't preserve and it won't sort of pickle. It won't turn into sauerkraut. Alternately, you can use too much salt, which then kills the sort of salt reaction, and it just makes it unpalatable and too salty, and it's not a lovely product. So I always start with for this amount, about 1.5 pounds. I want to start with about 1 tablespoon to 1.5 tablespoons first, and that should be good. If you're a little unsure of how salty it should be, there's a recipe in the handout that talks about, you can make a little bit of a starter brine or a little bit of extra brine. Sometimes you get cabbage that just is stubborn, and I guess I should start massaging while we talk, because it takes a few minutes for that to happen. So you sprinkle in your salt, and you're just going to start massaging and squishing your cabbage with your hands. And I hope everybody can kind of see what I'm doing. So you're just really picking it up and squishing. You want to massage that salt into the cabbage, because that's when it's going to start causing the cabbage to release moisture, release water. But the purpose of the brine is, sometimes you get cabbage and it's just stubborn and it doesn't want to release any moisture, and you're here for 20 minutes and you're squeezing and massaging and it's just being stubborn. So you can make a little bit of a brine to help make sure that you have the cabbage all covered. But you can see, even just for the few minutes that I'm here, I don't even know if we've done it for an entire minute, but just mixing it has already started to kind of break it down, and you see that the volume of cabbage of what I had is already reduced. It was up kind of at the top of the bowl, and we're now down about halfway. So you're just going to kind of keep massaging. You want to get it to a point, and this will take a little bit of time, so we'll talk, and feel free to ask questions as I fling cabbage at you all. You just want to kind of keep mushing it until it starts. You want it to get to where when you squeeze it, you see a bunch of juice run out of the cabbage. But back to the brine. That's really important, that as you're doing this and it's breaking down, if you need extra brine to make sure your cabbage is covered. But that's also a good way to taste your salt levels, because once you make that brine and then kind of give it a taste, then you can do the same as you're massaging your cabbage. You can kind of take a look, taste test it as you're working it and say, it doesn't quite taste as salty as my brine. Maybe I need to sprinkle in a little more salt. Or you might taste it and you're like, oh, that's a little too salty, in which case add some more cabbage. It's a little hard to take salt out once you're doing this. So that's why I always say start with a little less salt than you think. because you can always add it. It's just really hard to take it out, and you end up having to add a little more cabbage to kind of spread out the salt levels. But you don't want to get to a point where you have a giant, tub of sauerkraut because you've added too much salt. And as you can see, we've been at it for what, maybe a minute or two, and it's already starting to release liquid. And so that's what you want to do. You want to get it to where you're just smushing it with your hands. This is great for kids to sit here and do because you're just mashing cabbage. While I'm sitting here, moving the cabbage, does anybody have any questions? You have musical entertainment.
Can everyone please mute your screens? We're getting some feedback.
All right, you can really, I'll tilt my bow up here real quick so you can see. You can really see how much our volume has gone down just those few minutes of massaging the cabbage, and it's gotten really damp and moist. So this is where you kind of want to taste it. Pardon my fingers. That is nice and salty without being overly salty. So I'd say for a pound and a half, about a teaspoon of salt is really all you need. And you'll see, hopefully it's coming on camera, but you'll see just by squeezing the cabbage how much liquid is already coming out. And that's really what you want. You want to massage it enough so that when you pick it up and squeeze it, the juice just kind of runs out like that. So now comes the fun part where you take out your aggressions. Not too much, though, because you don't want to break your jars. But now is when you pack into your jars. And might need to. So you're just going to take your cabbage, stick it in your jar. I don't worry too much about it being on the outside because we'll clean that up after we get it in there. But you want to put some in. You take your, whatever you're using, your wooden spoon. I happen to love this because it's really just a 2-inch dowel rod that a friend got me. It's a hardwood that he's just sort of sanded for me and rounded off the edges a little bit, and a little bit of mineral oil to seal it and make it food safe. But it's really nice because if you look at the difference, this is a wooden spoon, which you can absolutely use. But if you're trying to pack in cabbage, you've got to do a lot more poking to get everything down and to get the brine to start up. With this, slide that out. With this, it's really just a couple of tamps and you've got the entire thing packed down. And so that's really what you're trying to do is pack the cabbage in there, get the brine starting to come up to the top so that it starts rising. You just want to pack it down, and then we may not need a second jar. You want to leave a little bit of headspace in these jars because you want the brine to be above the cabbage. The weight will help hold the cabbage down. This is probably all I'll put in here. Using the muddler will help kind of get the brine going as well. Slide this up here. This one's doing pretty good. I don't know how well you guys can see as I'm being so far away. But as I'm pressing down, you can see that there's a little bit of liquid coming up to the top. So that's where the weight of this muddler helps as well, because you can kind of really work the cabbage because you really want the brine above the cabbage. if it is sticking out of the brine, it will go bad. So you don't want that. And that's where this weight will come in handy, because once we've kind of mashed this all down, this will fit right in there. And that's why I like these ones with the handle in the center, because it's easier to get in the jar, especially on a wide mouth jar. It's easier to just hold it like this and drop it down into your jar than a smooth disc. So do we have any questions while I'm sort of, muddling my cabbage away?
Yeah, Theodora asks, is that really called a muddler?
Yes, it is. It is just a giant version of what they use in bars to make mojitos. I'm not sure if it goes by other names. I know they sell them. This is where having a friend who's handy, who has power tools to make them for you, is great, because for a, gosh, was it a 3 or 4 foot long dowel rod, which he got for maybe less than $10, he made me 4 muddlers. A single muddler on Amazon was like $15. So for less than the price of one on Amazon, he made me 4. So this is where having friends who know how to use power tools and can assist you, it's great, because who wants to spend that much money? And the $15 for the one was the cheap end of the muddler, of the Spectra, because some were like $30, and I'm like, for a piece of wood, that's outrageous.
It's 2 inches across, you said?
Yeah, I believe this is, I will double check with him, but I believe this is a 2-inch dowel rod. And he
Okay.
got his from like Lowe's or Home Depot.
And you got your glass weights for mason jars off Amazon?
Yes, yes, they are called, let me turn the box over here. They are from Year of Plenty, and they are called fermentation weights. I have a set of 4. I had gotten these. I was going to teach this class at Gulf War, so I have a bunch of these. But you can look for fermentation weights. A lot of people try, and this is one area where I tend. This is getting pretty good now. This is one area with the weights that I tend not to skimp on. Some people want to try and use like the rocks that you get from the dollar store, or some other, something that you might have picked up cheap from somewhere. If you don't know the content of the glass or the weight that you're using, you really want to be careful. I know people have in the past used, I've tried it, but it gets a little messy, where you take a Ziploc bag and fill it with water or extra brine, and you sort of pack the bag down into the glass jar here, and the weight of the liquid holds the cabbage down. That just gets a little messy for me sometimes, and I just don't, it gets frustrating to have to like pull the bag out and try everything out. This works really great. So you can see we have quite a bit of liquid going on here just from talking and smashing cabbage down. We probably could fit a little more in here, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So this weight will just go right down, and you can see already that's brought our brine up to the top of that weight. And so this weight, and I just kind of push it down with my finger so that it gets down in there. But that's what you want. You want your cabbage underneath here, and then you want your brine up top, keeping all of that cabbage submerged. And then this just gets a cap. And I stash mine in my fridge. And usually within 2 or 3 days, it's ready to go. If you like yours a little more punchier, a little more sour, you can let it go for 5-6 days, whatever you want. But really in about 3 days, you'll have a nice kind of pleasant sauerkraut. This is a lot. You ever eaten canned sauerkraut? Which I don't mind. I like the sour tang, but it oftentimes it has a really metallic kind of tang to it. This is a much gentler, less sort of like metallic tang to it, so it's got a really nice flavor to it. But when it's, take it out in 3 days, take the weight out, stir it up a little bit, taste test it, see if it's at the level that you like, and then it's ready to go. If it's where you're at, take the weight out, stir it all up to distribute the brine into the cabbage, pop the lid back on, and stick it back in the fridge. It will keep you will keep for a decent amount of time like that. If you want it to go longer and to pickle longer, leave it in there for 7 days, and just keep testing it and see where it gets to where you like it and you want to use it.
Robert asks if you started with any water in your bowl at all, or just strictly the brine cabbage juice.
For when we first started, there was no water in this bowl. This was strictly just 1.5 pounds of shredded cabbage and a teaspoon of salt. And the water comes from just massaging the cabbage, because what you're doing is you're starting to break down the fibers of the cabbage, that sort of stiffness of it, and massaging it just sort of breaks it down, and it starts to let the salt starts to let the juices come out and soften it even more. So there was no water in the bowl. Anybody else have any other questions?
Do have a comment from Tostin. He says that your local potter may be able to create crocks for you.
Oh, excellent. I have 3 Tostin's pots already. He is a fabulous potter. I quite enjoy all of his work. So I may have to speak with you at some point, Tostin, about some crocks. But yes, you could definitely use earthenware crocks. I actually found, I like the little jars because I'm a single person, and so I'm not anymore making, sauerkraut for a large group of people. But at one point I had found a large sort of ceramic cookie jar that was just sort of the shape of a tall crock. And it was perfect because I had a big, large glass plate that I could sit right down in there. And it was great for making enough sauerkraut without having, 6 jars in my fridge. I just had the one crock. So you can use anything other than, glass jars. I just use them because I'm a single gal and I only need one little jar of sauerkraut for me. But crocks are absolutely usable for.
I learned the hard way that if you use a jar that has like shoulders on it, then gungy bits get into the shoulders and can contaminate the whole thing.
Yes, so the jar that we
are important.
Yes, the jar that we did the lemons in, like this jar with these square bits, this would not be a good jar for sauerkraut. You really want a smooth-sided without shoulders, because like she said, stuff will get up into these little corners here, and it's just a pain. Now, you can, clean it out and wipe it out, but it is really a pain. I did it once in a jar, sort of a bigger version of this, and trying to get the cabbage out of these little shoulders, these little corners was, yeah. So I learned my lesson there. Use a straight-sided jar with no shoulders. Any other questions? I think I see chat popping up there.
We have what about using other vegetables? Could you use rabe, mustard greens, etc.? Something else maybe.
I have not tried those. It would be a good experiment. I might actually try that to see. What you'd have to watch is probably like cooking that vegetable and what happens when it gets too wet. So some greens tend to turn a little soggy and a little slimy and squishy and not very palatable once they pickle. So if you were to do something like that, you'd probably want to do it for a shorter amount of time. So you really would want to be careful so that it doesn't break down too much. Radishes, you can probably do it with radishes, but in those cases, you're probably going to have to use more brine than you would, because the cabbage, the massaging the cabbage makes its own pickling brine. So you just have to, I haven't tested it out with any other vegetables other than cabbage, other than, like making pickled vegetables where you're adding a brine to it. It would just depend on how much moisture you're able to leach out of those vegetables.
Daniel asks, is there a reason why you store it in the fridge instead of a few days in a dark room with is temperature the issue?
I'm in Trimaris, so it gets really hot and sticky and muggy fast. So a cool, dark area would be perfectly fine. I just use my fridge because, like I said, I'm in Trimaris and it's really hot, especially now in the middle of summer. But if you're not down here in Trimaris, absolutely, you can leave it on your counter or in a cool, dark place for it to do its thing. I mean, most Polish grandmas will tell you that there's usually a giant crock in the pantry on the floor, with a cloth cover on it to keep the bugs and the dust and everything out of, and it's just there. It's not in the fridge. I put it in the fridge because it's Trimaris.
Looks like all the questions. Oh, Eldemarians can probably go with the counter.
Yeah, I like to keep it out of direct sunlight. I don't want it to get too warm to where it's starting to, just really get overly productive as far as the juices. I will say that if you leave it out on the counter or even in the fridge, don't put your cap on too tight. You want the gases that are building up inside to be able to kind of leach out a little bit. So if you put the lid on, tighten it down, and then just kind of loosen it back up a quarter of a turn, is really just being covered to keep bugs and airborne yuckies out of your beautiful sauerkraut that you just made. I'm going to take a second here to get some of this out of the way so that we can move on to compost.
Annie asks, how about lids with a valve to let the gas out?
Yeah, absolutely. That would work perfectly. I don't have any of those, so I just use a little plastic glass. So you guys feel free to keep asking questions. I'm going to stand up for a second here and just move our cabbage and lemon stuff out of the way and bring in the vegetables and stuff for our compost class. Let's slide this out of the way. Welcome to Philomena's living room where she's doing her cooking today. So the next dish we're gonna, so that we don't have dead air while you're all watching me prep. The next dish we're gonna be making today is called compost, which is not for gardening. It is a dish of basically composed of vegetables. And that is where the name compost came from, which then kind of later got turned into the French for compote, which is a stewed fruit. But today we are making pickled or preserved vegetables, which are sort of, it's almost, I almost want to say it's not a typical pickle like you would think of for dill pickles. It's almost like a vinaigrette. We're going to make a pickling liquid out of some honey and some wine and some vinegar, and then add in some spices and some mustard and things. So I see chat popping up. Your Excellency, does anybody have any questions before we get started?
There are comments about brewers are good at making gases escape.
So again, I'm not.
That you could use a double layer of linen cloth.
Absolutely. Really, the lid is just there to keep out dust, bugs, stuff that's in the, in the air. So it's really just to protect the insides. It's the same thing as if you're a baker and you do a sourdough. I use like a coffee filter on top of my sourdough because I want some of the airborne yeast to be able to get in, but I don't want bugs and other things to get in there. So yeah, definitely you could use waxed linen. You could use a double layer of a cloth. I tend to buy these in bulk, which are just flour sack towels. I use these a lot for so many things. You could use one of these if you wanted to. You're just kind of protecting your sauerkraut from any bugs getting in there. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the compost because I think we're running down. Yeah, we're at just almost 11. We got another hour to go. So this is a really fun vegetable, really fun dish. It's great for travel. It makes great largesse gifts if you have people who are foodies. It's a really interesting dish. The name compost tends to put people off sometimes, and they're like, you know, they automatically think of gardening, but really it is a composed dish of vegetables. So if you're following along, we have our, I'm gonna move this out of the way for you. We have all sorts of vegetables that we're going to be using today, most of which I've sliced up already a little bit, just because, like I said, you don't want to watch me slice vegetables for ages and ages. But what we're using in this dish is what is in the recipe that I found, which was from Form of Curry, and it is, I use parsnips because I can't find parsley root. If you're able to find parsley root, totally use that. That would be great. I can't find it here in Trimeris, but we're going to be using parsnips, carrots. I will say, period carrots are technically purple, yes, so I did find purple carrots and some yellow ones, but I'll show you later that sourcing these purple carrots and using them turned out to be for naught, because once the vinegar hit them and they sat overnight, they turned orange. And I was like, I could have just used the orange carrots then at that point. But okay, but we have purple carrots, which are really nice. We have radishes, which I've just sliced up with a waffle slicer. We have some turnips, and then Brussels sprouts. The original recipe calls for, oh, and pears. The original recipe calls for cabbage. I like my food to look pretty, and just chunks and pieces of white cabbage just do not look appetizing to me. But these little Brussels sprouts are fantastic, and they look nice because the pickling liquid gets in all the little crevices of the cabbage, and it's delicious. So we'll start with just kind of like prepping. So with your Brussels sprouts, you just want to take off the really tough stem part here, and then peel off any wilted outer leaves that are kind of loose. If there's some that are loose, I don't necessarily mind it, but you just want to take off all the black or wilted or browned outer leaves. And then I like to slice mine in half. So I like to do all of my vegetables with an eye towards presentation. I don't want them to all look the same. I want them to look different and be pleasing to the eye. So carrots, I'm going to cut on the bias and make kind of nice oval shapes, just because I think those are pretty. The turnips I have just quartered and made into little wedges. So we'll finish up this carrot here. Does anybody have any questions while I finish up veggies?
There was a question from Grace about ideas or references on how preservation affects the nutrients or the content for the vegetables.
So for the most part, it's not necessarily affecting the nutrients because it's being preserved. It's not like, and there are, I would say, disagreements about, like with boiling a vegetable, whether that's leaching out the nutrition or the nutritional value of a vegetable. People disagree on that, but you're really just preserving it. in its form. You're changing the texture of it, really, is what you're doing, because it's kind of cooking it a little bit in the brine. So you're not really losing the nutritional value of it. If anything, you're adding a little bit of salt to it, or you're adding the other ingredients to it. But to my knowledge, and I'm not a professional chef, I'm not a scientist. To my knowledge, you're really not taking any nutritional value away from the dish that you're creating. For our parsnips, we're just going to slice those into medallions. Please feel free to keep asking questions while I chop. And as you get further down, we start off with a thicker end for the parsnip. So we do thinner slices because you want everything to be around the same, not necessarily the same size, but the same, for lack of a better term, density. It wants to all cook at the same time. You don't want a big, giant piece of turnip that's going to take a half an hour to kind of get fork tender, and then you have your radishes, which are thinly sliced. So you want everything to cook around the same time, because we're just going to be cooking these until they're fork tender. So if you're at the top of the parsnip where it's wider, you can make thinner slices. As you get down to the end where it's thinner, you can do a thicker slice because it's going to have sort of like the same cooking time. So that's our parsnips. And then pears will go in last. So basically what you would do at this point is you would move that out of the way. You would take all of your vegetables, because the pear is going to cook really quickly, and you're really at this point you'd only be heating it through. So you're going to take all your vegetables. They're all cut up. Put them in a pot. Parsnip. And you're going to cover them with water and bring that to a boil. And then you would add your pears. And you're really only going to cook them until they're fork tender. And even sometimes I like to be just shy of fork tender. You don't want mush, because otherwise it's just going to fall apart in your liquid. So you would cover these with water, put them on to cook, and once the water starts to boil and they're about maybe halfway done, then I would go ahead and slice up your pear. I do the pear in like either long quarters, or if I have like a little stubby pear. For a taller one, I might cut it in half and then chunk it up. So once the vegetables get about halfway done, add your pear in just until it kind of heats up and everything's fork tender, and then take it off the heat. And through the power of TV, we have vegetables already cooked, because I don't want to have you sit here and wait 20 minutes while vegetables cook. So we're just going to slide these out of the way, and we're going to bring in our cooked ones and move on. All right. So when the vegetables are done, what you're going to do is take them out of the water and lay them on. I use a cloth like this. So I use one of these cloths. You want to lay it out on a, hardly, you can't see my face. You want to lay it out on a cloth and let them drain and to cool off. And you're going to sprinkle them with about a teaspoon, half a teaspoon of salt. And then you're going to let them cool completely. And when they're cool is when you're going to then put them into a jar. So you can all see me here. So really it's just lay them on a cloth, let them cool with some salt. The salt's going to help draw out any excess moisture, and it's also going to flavor the vegetables. So once they are cooled to handle them, basically going to just dump them in another jar. And see, at this point, I was really excited because I had cooked these purple carrots and they were still purple. And I thought, fantastic, they're going to look great when this dish is done. So let me see if I can do this way. Here all day. Oh, nope, that's too long. So there's no special technique. It's just get all your veggies in your jar. And this is a dish where you have to plan ahead, because after this point, this will need to sit overnight. We're going to create a sort of vinegar bath for it, which is going to start preserving them, and the vinegar is going to soak in and help to start pickling them and flavoring them. One more here. All right, so we're done with that. All right, so get your vegetables in there, and now you can use, we're going to add vinegar, pepper, and saffron. You can use, the only vinegar I would probably suggest not using is plain white vinegar. It's very, very acidic and very stringent. So I tend to use either apple cider vinegar, which is definitely a vinegar they would have had back then. You could use red wine vinegar. You could use white wine vinegar. That one's kind of starting to grow its own little mother in there. I just wouldn't use plain white distilled vinegar. It's just too sharp. So we are going to add in, that's what we put the jar for. We're going to add in 1 cup of vinegar, and then just a little bit of pepper. I'm not the biggest black pepper fan, so I tend to skimp a little, although this recipe only calls for like 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. If you like yours peppery, you go right ahead and put in as much pepper as you want. I just don't like black pepper. And you just want a little pinch of saffron ground up. I just kind of grind mine between my fingers just to kind of break up the strands a little bit. I love the flavor of saffron, so sometimes I do a nice healthy pinch. Just be careful because it does kind of flavor everything. If you're not a real big fan of the saffron, back off on your pinch a little bit. And then, actually, I don't think I need that. I'll just do it in here. All right. 1 cup of vinegar. And then all you're going to do, I sometimes let the saffron bloom a little bit in the vinegar just to kind of start doing its thing. But for the sake of TV, we're just going to dump it right in. All right. And then that's the first stage. Now this will sit overnight or for 24 hours to kind of let it do its thing. I will occasionally throughout the day that it's sitting, I'll kind of give it a good shake. Just because the recipe for the volume to vegetables, you don't have a lot of vinegar here. It's really just kind of adding flavor. So I'll let it sit right side up for a couple of hours. I'll go out to the kitchen and I'll turn it upside down, let it sit that way for a couple of hours. I'll give it a good shake just to kind of distribute the vinegar throughout. And then just let it sit, and it will sit for 24 hours. And that one out of the way. And we have the one that I made yesterday. You will see, where is it at? I was so excited. This right here is my lovely purple carrots, which have turned orange. I was so disappointed. I was so excited that they were going to be lovely purple carrots in my compost, and they turned orange. I could just use the orange ones. But okay. So now this is that. You can see that my vinegar that was in here has probably what's leached out from the carrots is kind of turned a little bit of orange. That's fine, it doesn't matter. It's just there for flavoring. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to make the rest of the sort of preservation or vinaigrette, so to speak, because it's kind of really in a way what it is. We're just not using any oil. We're gonna make the rest of the pickling liquid. And so for that, we're going to use, got 1 to 2 cups of what they call in the recipe Greek wine, which really is actually just any sweet wine from Italy. I don't know why they call it Greek wine, but they do. So what I'm using is basically just a sweet marsala. You could use a sweet red wine if you wanted to, but really when they refer to Greek wine, they're kind of referring to like a sweet fortified wine. So for me, that ends up being a marsala, which works perfectly. So let's see, for that amount, I will say we'll use the whole 2 cups. Those 2. That's a lot. This is where we're going to actually break out the cooktop because we will have to. We're going to cook this and the honey together. So let me turn this on to start getting hot. The recipe calls for you to clarify the honey and the wine together. And the reason they say that is because in the past, honey was not the nice, clean, refined product that we get today. They would have to clarify the 2 together, and then as any scum arose to the surface, they would sort of skim that off. So at this point, really all we're doing is just kind of cooking the two of them together to kind of meld their flavors together. And we need half a cup of honey. Use this one since it's open. So do we have any questions while I'm just sort of assembling ingredients?
Not yet.
Through it. Oh, okay. So for honey, for my dishes, when I'm doing medieval recipes, I tend to look for raw honey or unfiltered. You just don't want really processed honey that's just, you know, I try to, you know, use something that they might have reasonably used in the past. I don't want to get to this point where I'm having to, you know, clarify it and skim off, you know, foam and scum that's coming up, but I tend to use a raw or unfiltered honey just to not have it be so processed. All right, so there's our honey. Next, we are going to add a tablespoon of what they call Lombard mustard, which is really, oh, right in front of me, is really just whole grain mustard. I tend to find a nice one. I've seen some where the mustard seeds are a little more ground up. I like the look of the ones that are really just all seed and a little bit of the vinegar and whatever recipe and wine that they use. So this French one that I find at our grocery store is, I think, fantastic. I really like the look of it. And you're only going to use a tablespoon. Dump that in.
Gwen commented that she'd not realized that this was done in 2 parts. She had tried this last year and did the vinegar and honey mix together all at once.
I have done that as well because I didn't read ahead in the recipe and just kind of like threw it all together. It works. I don't think that's going to really affect anything too terribly. The vinegar, adding the vinegar, which they don't say why they do it separately. I would assume that it's just to let the vinegar permeate the vegetables a little bit more because they don't necessarily have our preservation methods. It could have been that they wanted that vinegar to permeate a little bit more. They felt maybe that would preserve the vegetable a little more, or it gets in there and gives it a little bit of a different flavor. So I don't think it's going to affect it too much. Now we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of currants. And this is where cooking this ahead of time like this also helps, because currants can be a little bit hard, and putting them in with, putting this in with the honey and the wine helps to reconstitute them a little bit. Currants. Oops, spelling messy, guys. Okay, and now we are going to add in some of our spices. The spices here are the ones that are from the recipe. You can tweak them however you like. If there's a spice that you don't necessarily like, you don't have to use it. You know, use something that you do like. But we are going to be adding in some cinnamon, some fennel, we're getting boiling, a little bit. And the recipe calls for anise, but I was really unable to find anywhere anise. So I am substituting caraway seeds. This is, you know, you make it your own. These are the ones that they call for in the recipe. So we're going to add in a teaspoon of cinnamon. A teaspoon of poudre douce, which is basically sweet powder, which is really basically just a mixture of cinnamon, clove, ginger, nutmeg. I make my own because it's very simple to make. But these are the two powder, or I say the two seasonings. Poudre fort is usually is what they mean by strong powder, and that usually has pepper in it. Poudre douce is a sweet powder or fine powder, and it tends to not have pepper. It's just got your cinnamon, ginger, clove, nutmeg, things like that. And then we're going to add in our seeds. We've got fennel, and like I said, I have caraway because I can find anise, but you add in about 1/2 teaspoon of each. I know fennel is a polarizing ingredient for some people who don't like it. Like I said, feel free to customize it to your liking. That's absolutely what they would have done in period. Recipes were not written in stone. If you were chef to a lord who absolutely hated an ingredient, you wouldn't use it. So a lot of these recipes were written by the cooks to their, I guess, their master's likings, you know, to his taste buds. So really, we're just going to bring this up to a simmer, let it simmer for a little bit, and then we will pour it over our vegetables. And then that's it. Once you pour it over the vegetables, you can kind of let it cool down, and it's ready to serve.
So Gwen asks, dried currants or raisins of Corinth?
Raisins of Corinth are currants. I believe the recipe, I think the recipe just calls for raisins pour as whole currants. I've always taken that to be dried. I don't necessarily think that this would have worked with fresh currants. Because this is a sort of pickled preserved dish. Yeah, I don't know that I would use fresh currants in this. That is just about at a simmer right now. We're gonna let that simmer for just a couple of minutes. And does anybody have any other questions? Because we are, oh, that is bubbling away.
How long have you stored this?
I would say that this would easily store for a couple of weeks. Really, the recipe calls for you to basically put it up and take from it what you need and as you want. Especially if you're keeping it in the refrigerator. I think just depends on, I mean, how big of a batch you're making. I probably wouldn't go longer than about 2 weeks at tops.
Does it keep longer in the refrigerator?
Yes, it will keep longer in the refrigerator. Every time I've made it, it's never lasted longer than about a week and a half, 2 weeks anyway. So I might have to just leave this batch in the refrigerator just to see how long it will last. Oh, we are having pretty good bubble there right now. Let's turn this off.
Daniel has commented that he has stored this more than 2 years in a cold place and it was still okay.
Really? That is fascinating. I don't know that I would have thought that it would have gone 2 years. All right. Because I don't want to risk burning myself here, I'm going to let that cool down just a little bit before I pour that into, it's a little cold in my house. I don't want to pour that into cold glass and risk breaking. So we'll let that cool a little bit, and I think we're doing pretty good on time. Oh yeah, faster than I thought. Does anybody have any questions about anything so far today while we wait for that to cool a little bit? Because really, once we pour that on our vegetables and let it cool down, it's done. It's ready to eat. This, like I said, this works great for traveling. Apparently, as Daniel has said, it will last you 2 years if you make a giant batch of it. It is a very interesting flavor, especially with the mustard and the wine and the vinegar and the spices. That's why I call it almost like a sweet vinaigrette over the vegetables. It's very tasty. It makes a great side dish, especially for roasted meats. So feel free, if you've got any questions, ask away while we kind of wait for that to cool a little bit.
I was going to ask, how is it served? So as a side dish,
Yeah,
primarily?
yeah. I have always seen it served. You could totally, if you're vegetarian, you can totally just, eat this on its own. I've always seen it served as a side dish. Like I said, it works really well with roasted meats, roasted pork, roasted chicken. It works really great as a side dish with those. You could use it as sort of an appetizer if you were making like just a sideboard. You could totally serve it, as any sort of salad course or thing like that. Just a little side dish if you're doing like little nibbles for things. You could do it like that. It would work great too. I guess it's sort of like a sweet version of giardiniera.
Arwen had asked, do you need a water bath for a method for 2 years? And Daniel responded, no, however, he heated the container so it's almost the same and turned it upside down until it gets cold.
Okay.
Mikhail asks, how do you know if something has gone wrong on any of the recipes? What do you look for if it's all gone awry?
So what I always say, especially when you're having like pickled dishes like this, or anything kind of preserved, smell it as when you get it all done and you put it in, because really for this the scent is not going to change. So if you open it up and right away something pungent hits you in the face, it's probably bad. If you see mold starting to grow, that's bad. but really it will be pretty obvious when you open the jar, because it will smell off. So once you get your wine and honey in here and you get it all mixed up, and you notice that smell of what it smells like, this is a really pleasing. Just imagine honey and wine kind of cooked together with these spices like a malt. It almost reminds you like a malt cider or a malt wine. It has that sort of honey, warm smell to it. So if you open it and it's got a really off smell, then it's bad. If you start to see like slime forming, it's bad. Any kind of mold growing, that's bad.
There are no other questions here.
All right. So I'm gonna let this. It's still a little hot, so I'm gonna let that. If you get I think you guys are posting, Your Excellency, you guys are posting the handouts to the event site, or I know you're posting the handouts somewhere.
I believe they are posted on the event site.
Excellent. So if anybody, decides that they want to try and make any of these recipes and you forget it, you have a question, or you're like, dang, I forgot what she did. My email address is on all of the handouts. Please feel free to reach out to me and ask a question. I'd be happy to answer any questions. So I don't think I have, I was trying to think if I had put the links for the fermentation weights and stuff on my other handout, but I don't know that I did. But if anybody wants links to those, you can go ahead and email me and I'll be happy to send you the Amazon links where I got the weights and some of the other things. It's still pretty hot. Okay. So we're just going to pour this in.
Austin responded, going back to earthen crocks, he would not suggest using earthen crocks. Stoneware is a better choice for ceramic material that your crocks would be made out of.
Yeah, I would suggest using a definitely one that's glazed on the inside. You don't want one that's unglazed as far as earthenware or ceramic ware, because liquid is just going to seep through the unglazed insides, and you really don't want that. You definitely want something like a ceramic ware that's glazed on the inside. All right, that's actually was pretty good amount there, and so I just kind of put the vegetables down in, and you can see with the honey and the wine, it kind of takes on a golden color. And so yeah, that's not too much. Basically, just seal this up and let it cool down, and it's ready to eat.
Would this be served hot or cold?
This would be served cold or room temperature. Probably more room temperature, since they didn't really necessarily have a way to make it super cold. But I'd say room temperature or cold. You can eat it hot if you wanted to, but I think it definitely develops a better taste, letting this mixture settle in for a little bit and letting the vegetables pick up that flavor, because the little bit of heat that this honey and wine has will heat up the vegetables a little bit, which will kind of help them pull in some of the flavor. So I'd let it sit. I don't think, because the vegetables are already cooked and we parboiled them yesterday to soften them up, to cook them again would really break them down a little further than probably what you want. because cooking them again would just really make them softer. So serving it colder room temperature would be best. Anybody else?
No, we have no more questions.
Well, that is great. Everybody gets to go relax for a little bit before the next class, but thank you all for joining me in my class this morning. Please, like I said, if you have any questions, if you go to make these dishes and you have any questions, I am always happy to answer any emails that you want to send my way. And you can find my email on my handout. If you don't have the handout or don't want to pick up the handout, it is dammitphilomena@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for teaching today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
It was a fantastic class.
Thank you, Tostin.
Hope to see you soon.
You too.
Again someday.
Someday we'll get there.
Yeah. Take care.
Take care.
You have several people that have said thank you, comments, a wonderful class. Thank you, very informative class. Thank you. It was very great information.
Excellent. Excellent.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate you offering to teach the class, and this was wonderful. We also have, I'm motivated to try pickling and fermenting now.
Awesome. Awesome. I try to make the classes fun and entertaining and enjoyable, and so that it sort of inspires people to go out and try it on their own. And come see me at, I forget what time it is this afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock or whatever, when I'm teaching Viking cuisine and we're making pickled salmon.
Very good. All right.
All right, Your Excellency, thank you for moderating the class for me and popping out all those questions for me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It was a wonderful class and I enjoyed it. Philomena, thank you very much. I believe that they're going to have a survey to get some feedback from the instructors.
Okay.
So you might look for that. Other than that, I don't have any other questions, or I believe I might be your moderator for your Viking class as well. I'm moderating a Viking class this afternoon. So.
Oh, that's probably me.
They did not tell us who our instructors were, so I've had to look on the list of classes and kind of figure out, okay, yeah, that's the one I'm
Yes, if it's the surprisingly sufficient diet of Viking cuisine, that is me.
Yep, that is actually the class so I will see you this afternoon.
All right, I will see you this afternoon.
Have a great rest of your morning.
Thank you. I'm going to go take a little bit of a break, and then I'm going to co-lead a roundtable in about an hour and a half.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to end your session if you don't mind.
Perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.